today I want to talk to you about when to leave group boards, because this can be a frustrating and confusing process. And if I'm being honest, there really isn't a perfect strategy for when exactly you should leave a group board and when you should keep it on your account. But there are some tips and pointers for you to consider when you are going through this process. So that's what we're going to go over today. Not all group boards are created equal. Fake followers, spam, and too many pins that are not optimized can bring down group board performance. If there are too many fake followers, obviously that brings down the engagement dramatically, and that is something that Pinterest recognizes, and that brings that board's performance levels down in their algorithm. So they're likely to show your pins and everyone else's pins on that board less to other people. If a group board has too much spam on it might not have anything to do with you, but other people happen to let spammers on the board and they purposely post links that aren't approved, that can bring down the board scores as well. And the same with there just being too many pins that aren't optimized. And this kind of goes with some people not taking care of their group boards. Some people take very good care because they use them for business and they really monitor their accounts. But remember that some people who own these group boards, they're just using Pinterest for personal reasons, and they don't mind letting anybody and everybody on their group board. They just kind of think the more the merrier. So when you see group boards that have a lot of really tiny pins that maybe link to videos, or they're in landscape mode instead of portrait, if they don't have a lot of really big and beautiful pins, chances are that board's performance is going to be a lot lower because there are people that are pinning a ton of content that just isn't getting repinned. Again, that brings down the overall performance of the board. Your pins will not do well on these boards and they will only hurt you in the long term. Anytime you're pinning on Pinterest and your pins are getting a bunch of 0 repins, it's not good to put a bunch of content out there on Pinterest that isn't getting any love from people, because Pinterest will associate your content with just not being popular. So keep that in mind. So how do you tell if you should leave a group board? Well, the answer is that it depends. Are your pins performing better or worse on that board compared to the rest of your boards? This is basically the number one tool that I use to determine it. It's not quite a perfect strategy, but it's a really good rule of thumb. And the way to do this, to test this out, is you want to pin to a new group board every day for at least 2 weeks before making any decision about whether you should keep it or not. You can't make a decision in 2 days because Pinterest takes a little bit of time to kind of recognize new content and new actions on Pinterest. So if you're suddenly pinning to a new board that you don't own, it's generally going to take about 2 to 3 days for your pins to kind of pick up steam, if ever. If it's a bad group board, they won't ever pick up steam. But if it's a better group board, it'll probably take at least 2 to 3 days for your pins to kind of start getting repins on that board. So keep that in mind. And I do recommend pinning for at least 2 weeks. That way you have 2 weeks of data to compare those pin scores and repins to your own account. And you're going to do this in Tailwind. This is another reason why I cannot speak highly enough of Tailwind, just because of the importance of tracking everything to the growth of your business. Otherwise, you are really pinning blindly. So in this scenario, you can see right here, this is a screenshot from mine. This is my workout board right here, and this is a Healthy Recipes group board. You can see this icon right here shows it's a group board. And this is just kind of an example to show you guys, and another reason to explain that it's not a perfect strategy. Because if you see here, my virality score is higher than this board score, and so is my engagement score as well. If I told you that that was a perfect strategy and a follow it every time, then you would want to dump this group board because my scores are higher. But I actually get really good engagement on this group board, so I keep it. You'll notice it has 144,000 followers compared to the 76,000 on my workout board. And you'll notice it's got a lot of repins right here. So there are also way more pins on the board itself, but I monitor my pins on this group board and they do very, very well. I keep that board for that reason. When you join a group board, you're not going to see it back in Tailwind right away. It's generally going to take about 12 to 24 hours for that board and its score to show up. So just keep that in mind as well. The other way to tell is in your Pinterest analytics. So if you go in your Pinterest analytics here, you can click on this section that has boards with top pin impressions in the past 30 days, and you can see where these boards rank as far as impressions, clicks, saves, likes, and number of pins go. You'll notice right here, the top board with the most pin impressions for me is Best Pins. And this is a board that is owned by someone else, and then all these boards right here, I'll say by Avocado, so they come next. And this Healthy Recipes board I just told you guys about, this is up here and it has a lot more impressions than my other boards. This will help you determine sort of where those boards rank in relation to your own. So a good rule of thumb, leave boards if your pins are performing worse than they are on your own boards. I explain this is not a perfect strategy. It does require judgment, and just make sure that you spend that first 2 weeks just testing out the pins and comparing them to your pins and your boards. Keep in mind that the stats on the board's follower growth, the impressions your pins are getting, and the performance scores, they all matter. So keep all of these things in mind when you're making that decision. And you can almost always dump boards with a virality score of less than 3. If the boards you're on have a virality score of 1 or 2, that means you can probably expect to get repins on there of about 1 or 2. The only time I would make an exception for this is if you are brand spanking new, you have 0 followers or 25 followers. If you have just barely started, then even 1 to 2 repins could probably help you. But generally, if you have even a couple hundred, 300 followers or more, any boards that have a virality score of less than 1 or 2 are generally going to be bad news. The other good way to look at it is that if you're in Tailwind and if you go to Board Insights and you look at the board rankings, if all of your group boards are at the bottom of the list, that means that they're probably not performing nearly as well as your own boards.